Alright, I want to do a video about turning limitations into advantages. Turning your limitations, making your limitations work in your favor. So I recently experienced a small setback in my process, and it made me reevaluate a lot of things. And I realized that I have all the tools that I need. It's just a matter of implementing them in the proper proportions and through the proper rituals and developing discipline around them. And I realized that I was pushing myself too fast as far as my physical practice, my movement practice, and that's why I injured my knee. And my body, for whatever reason, it needs to go slow. Like I have to really work on the fundamentals. I have to really work on improving my mobility, really work on strengthening my connective tissues and improving my form and function. And at times in my life, I've gotten very frustrated about that. I've thought, oh, woe is me. Why can't I just be like everyone else and just go have fun in the park and do yoga and climb trees? And some days I can do that. Some days I can do that just fine. Other days I can't. And sometimes I get frustrated about that. And sometimes I think that because I have that disadvantage, that my body is a little bit more fragile and inflamed than the average person's, that somehow that means I can't achieve my goals. But that is very much a poverty mindset. That is very much a limiting belief system. And what I can do is I can take those limitations, so-called limitations of mine, and I can turn them into an advantage. And it's pretty rare for someone in their 20s to be very disciplined and have a strict routine and to be very efficient with their use of time. In part because we just feel like we have plenty of time to figure all this stuff out. But mostly it's just because we haven't developed the discipline and the routine. But that's what I'm missing. And so for me to turn this limitation into an advantage, I'm going to use this as an opportunity. Whereas other people can just go around and play, and maybe they don't have to be as structured, maybe they don't have to be as regimented with their practice. For me, I have to be vigilant and focusing on the fundamentals. I have to plan out my progress every day at a time. I have to sit down and come up, okay, this week I'm working on my hip extension. Next week I'm working on my knee stability. The week after that I'm working on my shoulder mobility. The week after that I'm working on my passive hang. All these different exercises, whereas if I didn't have these health problems, if I didn't have these chronic pain issues and joint pain issues, I could just get away with not having those routines. I could get away with not focusing on the fundamentals. But because my body needs those fundamentals, I'm going to spend years of my life practicing and being disciplined and mastering those fundamentals. And by the time all the people who are my age now are starting to have issues with their joints and are starting to run into injuries and these sorts of things, I'll have the fundamentals mastered. And I'll be able to play for many, many years to come. And so it's just a shift in the mind. It's a shift of the mindset. Turning limitations into advantages. A great example of how I've done that in my past is when I moved into a minivan. I was in and out of my parents' house in Virginia for many years, really struggling to get on my feet financially and really feeling out of place. I didn't feel like Virginia was my home. I didn't feel like Washington, D.C. was my home. I felt stuck there. I felt trapped. And I always kept coming up with excuses like, oh, I need money before I can leave. I gotta save up money. And then eventually one day I just said, fuck it. I am not getting another job in this place. I'm getting the hell out. And I didn't have any money, so I sold my car and I bought a minivan for $1,500 off Craigslist. I spent a couple months living in my parents' basement, building my van, preparing to leave, selling all my possessions. I took out an extra credit card, and I drove west. right? And I used that limitation, the limitation of not having enough money. I used it to my advantage, because since I didn't have enough money, I couldn't transition to the West Coast like a traditional person. I couldn't find a job and get a house and all that stuff. I ended up going a completely different route. I moved into a van. I lived in that van for 9 months. But because I did that, because I went that route, I came to a completely different place. If I had taken the traditional route, if I'd had that money to move to the West Coast in some sort of a safe and structured way, a secure way, I would have ended up in San Francisco or LA or Seattle or Portland, one of these big cities where I had friends who could help me out in the transition. Places where I could get a guaranteed job and find a place to live. But instead, I ended up in this incredible tiny town in the mountains where I didn't know a single person. And I was able to stay here for 9 months in my van without any support. I was able to be totally self-sustained and just live really cheap. And I racked up quite a bit of credit card debt, but now I'm in a situation where I can start paying that down. And if I hadn't had that limitation of money, then I would have ended up in a completely different place, in a completely different situation. And I love this town. I love where I live. Look at these manzanitas that are behind me. There's just manzanitas everywhere. I love the ecosystem here. This park that I'm in right now, this is the park. I haven't been here in a while. I haven't been here since the fall. And this is the park I spent almost every day in. I kind of lived in this park when I was living in my van. And so I'm just sort of spending my afternoon revisiting those experiences and just realizing how by taking those chances I experienced so much novelty, so much growth and expansion in a single year that never would have been possible if I'd played it safe. It never would have been possible if I had told myself that my limitations were going to hold me back. Your limitations can be used to propel you forward. It's all about belief systems. You know, as Ralph Smart says, it's all BS. I love that line. It's all BS. All belief systems. So, that's just some thoughts I had about using limitations to your advantage. And this is something I plan to do more in the future. All right. Say hi to the Manzanita. Hi, Manzanita.